Welcome everyone. My name is Susanne Drakborg and I'm the team lead of Stella Polaris at Childhood. And during this session we'll be discussing an under-discussed topic, namely the issue of cybersecurity and the connection to child sexual abuse. And our aim for this session is to explore the responsibilities and the opportunities within this sector. And with us, I'm very happy that we have our guests, Staffan Truvé from Recorded Future and David Jacoby from Unbreached. So to begin, I would like for you to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your work, and then I have some follow-up questions for you. So Staffan, would you like to begin, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I come from Recorded Future. We are a threat intelligence company. Sometimes we say that we are probably the largest private intelligence organization in the world. So our goal, very simplistically, is to gather all the information from the internet, organize it, and give access to it for people defending the free world, as we like to call it. So essentially, both cyber threats, but also geopolitical threats, influence operations, essentially all kinds of things which threaten companies, organizations, or governments. We're pretty old, we've been around for 15 years. We started off by really organizing things around geopolitical threats, but then of course over time many of the attack vectors have become digital. So these days cyber threats and threats from things like influence operations are the primary concerns we have. Maybe that's enough. And I should say the connection, I'm on the advisory board of Stella Polaris, and one of the reasons is that we've been using AI from the start for doing this, for organizing everything at scale. Started with text. More recently, we're also doing image analytics. We help people do things like search for image similarity, and I just showed Susanne here just in the break here, we just have a brand new model for detecting AI-generated images automatically. So building tools for human analysts to do a better job at defending us.
And I gave him the most difficult images I could find.
And we nailed it.
Yes, 2 out of 2, so 100% correct. Statistical significance we can discuss, but those two were very good. Over to you.
Okay, I'm David. I've been working as an ethical hacker for over 30 years, securing infrastructure in not just Sweden, but globally, preventing digital cybercrime. I'm also part of something called Digitala Varningsgruppen, which is a loose organization of Swedish companies sharing information between each other to stop digital crime, basically. And I've been doing this for quite some time. Before we actually had internet, we just had modems and dial-up. I run 3 companies right now where we focus on helping small, medium clients to be more secure and getting the same type of security as the big companies, because a lot of people think that cybersecurity is very complicated and very expensive, and it's very unfair that only a few companies in the world can afford professional services. So my vision is to help everybody who cannot really do it. A little bit of a little Robin Hood story. And I don't know if I should mention, I was part of the TV show Hackad, which was on SVT, where we hacked companies live on TV.
Did you have fun?
We had fun.
Yeah.
Yes. Enough about me.
Yeah. No, not at all, because I have 2 follow-up questions for both of you, and they're both about you. So the first one is, could you share with the audience something that might surprise them about yourselves? And then also share some reflections on what you've heard so far during the day.
You start.
Oh, okay.
Oh. That surprised them about me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually a very shy person, and part of my job is to go and do lectures and be out there and have, publicly facing. But it really drains me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be competing in gymnastics. Don't you see that on my on my body? And some reflections is something that I actually live for a lot, and that is that what we're trying to solve here, even if it's AI or technical or identifying technical problems, I don't think that is the solution. We have very good technology already, but it's the human point. We always come back to the human point when it comes to detecting these things or preventing these things or so on. And I think that is something that struck me, that even in your industry, in this industry, which I don't usually work with, it's the same thing. It's the human factor of things that's very, very important that we have to focus on.
Thank you. Are you ready, or?
Sure. Yes. Most surprising is I never competed in gymnastics, actually.
Oh.
No, I think, I think people think I'm a cybersecurity person. I'm not really at all. I mean, I always see myself as a more, let's say, pure play computer science person.
You should have told me before we invited you to this.
Yeah, exactly. But then you would have invited me.
No,
So good to be here.
Okay.
No, but so I see computer security or cybersecurity really as an interesting use case for what we do. And I think, in general, I think one of the fascinating things about this field is that we need to combine so many different skills. Computer science, you need psychologists, you need, if you're combining things like geopolitics, you need social science people, all kinds of people. It's not a sort of monoculture that you can have here.
Well,
You really have, like we heard in the previous session, I think you need to combine different competencies if you're going to be successful.
I realized that I should have been fair, and I should have started off by saying something surprising about me. So
Yes.
I will volunteer that I have been retweeted by the Vatican. And they didn't notice the hashtag. I was tweeting about our founder, the Swedish Queen, but I also wanted to mention LGBTQ rights, so I added the hashtag #YesQueen, and they retweeted that. So very proud.
Nice.
Now, to start off the session, we have asked Staffan to just give us a little introduction as to what is cybersecurity, and just briefly about the sector before we go into the details.
Yeah, and I think every single practitioner has a different definition of that. To me, or to us, I should say, at Recorded Future, we have the broadest possible definition. So really, any kind of illegal activity, we want to help prevent any kind of illegal activity which uses, computing devices or networks or network-based services. So whether it's for stealing money or for stealing information or for breaking systems or for using it to, for example, sell drugs or illegal pictures, whatever. So essentially working to protect any way crime or illegal activity is being done with computers. And I think you need to have that definition, because otherwise you end up on a sort of sliding scale and saying this is cybersecurity, this is not. And I think when we started this some years ago, people didn't really see it like that. It was very much traditional antivirus protection was sort of cybersecurity in those days. Today, I think it covers everything in society, essentially, because we're so digitized.
And on that note then, to which extent do you both feel that the issue of child sexual abuse is discussed within the cybersecurity sector, be it at events or just within companies?
I can answer that if you want to.
Yes, because you go to a lot of events.
Exactly, and I'm embarrassed to say that it's not discussed at all. Not at all. Not a single time at any event during my 30 years has the discussion of how to prevent sexual abuse or the content or anything. I know that some companies in the security industry, they do it.
Yes.
Because they have the technology to identify malicious code or malicious type of behavior within the systems, and then you can also detect, for example, the images or videos that we know about, what's known. But the industry itself is extremely immature, and I think that's really bad, because I look back at the time when I started, when people told me, why don't you get a real job? This computer security stuff, is it really for you? Like, why don't you, I don't know, become a lawyer, or doctor, whatever, other type of thing.
Oh, that's a real job.
Yeah. But now there's universities, there's high schools, there's training, there's YouTube videos, there's a lot of different things. Even that we are here right now talking about cybersecurity, just as to demonstrate that it changed the landscape, right? But from a cybersecurity point of view, where's the educations in the universities for maybe IT forensics is the closest thing that we can study to fight this kind of things, or maybe psychology, but there's no real definition of how we should combat this, from training or, from the industry point of view.
And what is your experience?
No, I think it's pretty much the same. I guess with the only exception, the only thing people maybe know is that some material is illegal to have in your systems. So
Yeah.
therefore, you desperately try to figure out how do I ensure that there is nothing there,
Mm.
but not the greater implications of it. It's just sort of a hygiene check. There is no one taking or working to take responsibility for it or sort of solve the underlying problem, really.
And it's interesting because, for example, terrorism or money laundering are examples of issues that are quite commonly discussed and researched within the cybersecurity sector. Why do you think that child sexual abuse, especially online child sexual abuse, is not addressed?
Again, I apologize for the answer I'm going to give you right now, because it's all based on commercial. I can sell a product that I can make money off. I can sell systems, I can sell trainings, I can sell a lot of different things that companies need to protect themselves against digital threats. But when it comes to sexual abuse, I don't really see an obvious product or an obvious service that I can sell. And I think that is the reason why there are so many companies not touching this area, because there's no financial value for them. There's no financial benefit of doing this. There's a human point of view, of course, but a lot of companies do not even touch that. They say they do by adding a lot of filters on how to prevent the knowns, so to say. But there's no real research, there's no real initiatives when it comes to these things from the security industry. And I again apologize. I think it is because there's no, financial benefit from that type of products or services.
It's interesting from a legal point of view because, of course, what we know, and we have NetClean represented in the room, among others, which is a Swedish company that is very much focused on helping companies not be in possession of child sexual abuse material on their servers. Interestingly enough, what we do know is that people who are interested in child sexual abuse material, if they're not living on their own, if they have a partner or a family, they will use very often their work computer to access the child sexual abuse material, because it is, in fact, the only laptop where nobody will be suspicious if you say, no, you cannot use it, I cannot share the password, you cannot have it, I won't leave it with anyone. And so it's interesting from a legal point of view if a company is, in fact, in possession of child sexual abuse material on their servers, even if the company does not have intent. When do you define it as being negligent, as not having done enough with the technology that actually exists today, and not old filters that you hide behind to say that actually you're criminally liable for hosting this? And I guess that if that were the case, you would have a financial incentive for companies to do everything they can.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, the fact that NetClean doesn't have more competition is a bad sign in that sense.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if it was a conscious business decision people made in general, it would be a different market. No, but I think it's right, and I mean, there's no sort of obvious way to solving that. I mean, as we see today, companies invest billions of dollars in protecting against malware, virus, ransomware, the big threat today, right? Because they see that as existential threats to their businesses. But if you're blunt, I think if there was to be sexual material on their servers, it would be a cost, but a small cost to them.
Yes.
So
exactly, just like someone mentioned earlier during the day, Dan, not enough children were killed by cars in the UK for the society or industry to bother addressing it. If the cost is not high enough, then that is a problem. I actually read ahead of this session about a report that came out that was presented to the US Congress. I shared it with you as well, where they were highlighting the shortcomings of computer science researchers and major security conferences, that even when the issue of child sexual abuse material was almost never addressed in different papers that were discussing the risks of darknet and other anonymous services. So they will address all the other risks, but not mention that maybe also there is a problem with child sexual abuse material on those services.
and I think one part of the problem is that the fact that we do have legislation against it means that people are scared to touch it. If you're a university researcher or if you're in a company doing research on these things, it's so complicated to be able, if I wanted to say build a better machine learning model to detect this kind of material, the rules and regulations about having that on my systems to be able to train and evaluate and so forth, not to mention the fact that you can't really have human annotators look at it. Everything is sort of set up to make it impossible to work on those problems.
No, it's almost radioactive for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's also a misunderstanding because at least in Sweden, you are in fact allowed to be in possession of child sexual abuse material if you have very specific reasons for it, such as research or you're a journalist, etc. But it's not a reason that you can come up with in hindsight.
No,
in other words, obviously, yeah.
And I think like in many other problems, the fact that even if you as a researcher know that, then you need to convince your corporate lawyers about it, and they will always say no because there is always some risk involved, so
They won't say it's complicated. No, they're going to say no.
In that case, I think but I'm sorry I missed that session this morning. I heard
Everyone's
the story,
referring to it.
but I think in reality you wouldn't have needed that complicated sign, because if a lawyer think it's complicated, they will hold up the no sign in reality.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Actually, is there something you would like to add?
Well, in the security industry, we often go after a methodology called assume breach. And that's something that I've been thinking about now during this day, when in most of the conversations, specifically when it comes to AI and this other session about content generated by AI, that's the unknown, right? That is the things that we do not know, that we want to detect or anything. But what do we do with the things that we do know? In the industry, we do this. We have this methodology, as I said, called assume breach. Assume that something's happening and work around finding policies or structures or training or firewalls or segmentation, whatever kind of technical things that you want to implement in your organization to prevent something, because you know that something will happen. I think that's something that the security industry can teach other industries to work after the same kind of methodology. Instead of fighting the unknowns, we can do what we can with the knowns, with the domain, with the forums, with the pictures, with the content, with all these different things. Because there are a lot of things that is known.
Yes.
I've heard some numbers today about we detect this and that many pictures or images every year and so on. What do we do with those knowns? I know that you're the front runners of this, but I think, what about all the telcos? What about all the hosting providers? What about the operating systems out there? The web browsers, the instant messaging apps, all these things, all the video games that's out there, we should do more with the knowns than what we actually do.
And so the problem is that many of us, many sectors, not unique for cybersecurity, to an extent work in silos, and especially also the child protection sector is quite cordoned off, relatively speaking, with a few impressive exceptions. So what is needed to inspire, to engage, to start collaborative efforts, to see solutions that technically already exist and are maybe applied in other areas, and to apply them to safeguard children?
So I think, from my perspective, what's one of the big trends in cybersecurity is that, as I mentioned in the beginning, we do intelligence. I'm heavily biased when I say this, but I think intelligence has become a major new way of doing cybersecurity. So essentially being aware of what's happening out there, which means very broad gathering of information and automated analysis of it. So of course that whole model is exactly what you need if you want to combat this kind of crime as well. So I think, to me, really see some as something which we should be able to handle in a general framework. It's a special case, but all the processes, tools, methodologies you need should really be much more broadly applicable. So because otherwise, it's expensive to build point solutions, but if you can see this as one use case in a sort of broader portfolio, then it's more reasonable. It fits better, so to speak, into the model.
And the first time that I was shown one of your tools as well, I think this was over a year ago, I was immediately thinking, could that be applied to analyze and collect information from darknet forums that specialize in child sexual abuse? So not necessarily building a new tool, but could possibly one day, recorded future, also be helping improved the understanding of that intelligence.
Mm. And I think the other aspect of this is that to be successful here, you need to again push the limits a bit against what your lawyers might sort of knee-jerk reflection say no to. So if you look at how we've evolved over the years, we've become more aggressive in how we collect information. We now break into criminal forums and get information there. We steal from the thieves, so to speak, in different ways. And we do that completely legally. We do yearly checkups with the U.S. Department of Justice and other places to make sure that what we do is legally and, as we judge it, ethically okay. Because of course, doing these kind of things in one way can intrude on privacy and so on. But I think ändamålen helgar medlen, the means to an end here. So I think you need to be more aggressive and dare to do more things if you're going to be successful, because otherwise it's a very uneven battle with the bad side.
Yeah, I want to add to that, and that is another trend that's happening in the security industry is that, and I mentioned it before, that we're becoming less technical. We don't need more products, more services. We need behavior, right? And I think we can adopt that also when it comes to the training and the behavior. Like what we need to teach the children, we need to teach the adults, and we need to teach them not just what's right and wrong, but also what happens if you do receive some kind of messages like grooming or just bad content. Where's the report here button? Where's it should be easier to do those different things, because in the security industry we have an SMS number which you can forward fraud that goes to all telcos that works together. You can of course contact the Swedish police if you suspect there's some kind of fraud going on. But in your area, what do we do? How do we work with awareness? How do we work with training? And how do we actually have some kind of easy mechanism to say, this looks really fishy, I'm gonna report this?
Something that we do know from children is that so unfortunately a lot of children are experiencing some kind of sexual harassment online. So at the very least they get unwanted dick pics, and at the worst they're being groomed and they're being sexually abused and raped online. But what we do know also is that most kids, they know how to deal with these threats. They know how to, and it's still important though, like we need to teach them younger and younger. We need to secure that all children are given the same opportunity to protect themselves. But what we also have to remember is that most children know how to protect themselves, and they know how to block or ignore or report or whatnot. And the problem is that the perpetrators, they cast often a very wide net, if we want to speak about grooming, because they're only interested in that one kid out of 100. And then if they reach 1,000 kids, then they have 100 children that for various reasons did not block because they were frightened or they were curious, or maybe this is an abuser who's using patterns of giving them praise and etc. And so the question will always still remain, how do we protect those most in need of protection? And there's no silver bullet, of course, but important to remember. Yeah.
But I think there are also other things. I mean, one thing, a big problem, we actually talked about this over lunch, is if you look at the operators, the operators in a sense are the ones who build the internet, right? In many ways. But they never take any responsibility for content. They always claim that we are just a carrier. So they don't do any. They could do much more in terms of monitoring not only which traffic goes where, but they could do content filtering as well if they wanted to. But they don't. So they've opted out of that whole. They don't take responsibility. And they claim that they're not allowed to, which I don't think actually is true. This is again a question for lawyers. But if you look at it, the operators have fairly far-going rights in terms of protecting their networks and their customers. So depending on how you interpret it, I think they are one instance who could do more in this.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but I completely agree that there's at least some data that's
100% agreement among
yeah.
non-lawyers in the
publicly available that they can use to actually maybe not stop it, but prevent some of these attacks. At least do something instead of doing nothing.
I don't know if this is the right form to say I am a lawyer, but but one initiative that I know that Barncancerfonden actually is doing, because like everyone agrees, just like with child sexual abuse, that pediatric cancer is horrific, right? And AI could help combat it in a much more efficient way. And then you have, understandably, lots of lawyers saying no instead of it's complicated. And what I know that they wanted to do, at least, and what I wish that maybe we would do within our sector and in the cybersecurity sector, is gather all the frustrated lawyers, the ones that want to say yes but are not always able to. And because they need to brainstorm, because the law is nuanced and difficult, and try to see what legal arguments can actually be found. And also the companies, I believe, they need to give enough resources and time for the lawyers to do this, because when in doubt, if you're stressed and you have a bunch of other things to do, you're gonna say no. Yeah. That's your job. So it would be amazing to actually have a legal initiative of sorts to figure out what can and cannot be done. But speaking of legalities and speaking of stealing, I would like to get back to that. And the info stealer logs, that's the segue I'm doing. Yeah. Because you recently came out with a report.
We did come out with a report, and this is a good example. So we've been, over the years, as I said, pushing the limits on what are we allowed to do. Let me give actually an example, because let me go a bit broader. So as I mentioned before, the operators don't take responsibility. But we actually, for a couple of years now, we've been building a system to do global collection of net flow traffic. So net flow, technical word here, that's the traffic you can gather from internet traffic, which only contains information about which IP address is talking to which other IP address on which port and using which protocol. It does not include any content at all. This is something which usually is not collectible, because it would be intruding on privacy and other things. But we discovered that if you have a good way of classifying which IP addresses are malicious, in our example in this case, we build a daily list of all the ransomware control IPs, the ones controlling the ransomware networks. And then we built up a global network with operators who actually are working with us on this, where we send that list out and we collect back information where one of the endpoints in that communication is a malicious IP. In that case, the other endpoint is very likely a victim. So this falls under the right to defend your network and your customers. So that was very inspirational for us, and very surprising that we could actually do it. But then we started thinking, can you do more things like this? So another thing we've been looking into now is seeing, can we steal, almost, I would say? Let's call it collect, it sounds better. So there's one class of malware called info stealers. So this is malware which gets installed on your machine, and it only collects information. It can log your keys, or it can steal your credentials from your web browser and other things. But it does no harm. It just steals that and then sends it back to someone. Turns out, if you're clever enough, like some of my colleagues are, you could actually gather some of that information. So essentially, you're stealing the info stealer logs from them. That's something we've been doing for some time now. So then two colleagues of mine had the idea that maybe we could use this to find machines, let's call it, machines which are communicating or logging into various CSAM sites. So what we did was we actually contacted you and a couple of other organizations. We built a long list of these are known bad places, very analogous to the known command and control nodes in the other case. And then we just ran a correlation between that. So we were then able to identify on a fairly small sample of data around 3,300 machines which had logged into one or more of those malicious sites. And I think maybe 150 of those actually had credentials for several. So that's pretty interesting. So now you have evidence of a machine where someone using that machine has logged into multiple sites providing illegal material. That's pretty good. And the interesting thing is that in many other cases, when people try to do this, the people use Tor networks and other things to try to get away from being detected. The clever thing is that this material is actually collected on the end user machine, where you know the IP address. So it's much more traceable than other ways of collection. So that means that we can actually, with high likelihood, identify, well, at least the machine and therefore the location where some individual on this machine, or some individuals, I should say, there's always uncertainty. But definitely good enough material for someone like police to start an investigation. At least that's how we interpret it. So we just came out with this report a couple of weeks ago, but I think that shows...
I don't think it's official yet.
Okay, we have not come out with this report yet.
Mine is still under embargo. My copy is still under embargo.
Okay, so it's coming out very soon.
No.
But I think this is an interesting example again of how you can use tools we developed originally to collect information so that we would know which systems were at risk of ransomware. But we can actually use this for this case as well. So, we built the infrastructure for a big case, but we can now use it for this as well.
And some of the examples in the report, they also chose a few case studies, if you will, where they wanted to find out wanted to see if they could identify the person behind the machine. And in the 3 cases, I believe they all could. And in one of them, it's a classic case in a way. This person had previously been convicted of child sexual abuse in the US and years ago. And then also what they could see is that this person, who has since passed away earlier this year, was volunteering in children's hospitals, which is also a classic, trying to get close to children while also being very active in child sexual abuse forums on the darknet. And to us, this report, which has been quite inspiring, because it's also an example of a very interesting company that works within cybersecurity and for various reasons is not focusing on child sexual abuse, because that's not a given within the cybersecurity sector. But as we began having conversations, your engagement in Stella Polaris, you also encouraging us to meet with your colleagues. We don't know everything that your company does, obviously, but it inspired them to start brainstorming and thinking, what are we already doing that could maybe also be pointing towards prevention of child sexual abuse.
And I think there are many other companies in the cybersecurity business could think the same way, because we have our tentacles out everywhere there with sensors. I mean, the whole industry is building sensors. So you can figure out new ways to use that sensor information. I think it's a very promising way of doing things, actually.
Yeah, also in a way that's not breaking privacy.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can do it at the same time. You don't have to read every single bits and bytes. There's other types of data that you can identify, saying this is absolutely an indication that that individual or this machine has been visiting sites that it should not be visiting.
And given the theme of the day, I would like to emphasize that there is zero AI involved in this.
Yeah.
Yes, very good. You also mentioned integrity issues, integrity and privacy, something that we grapple with a lot when we're discussing combating child sexual abuse. And the cybersecurity sector is extremely well versed in these issues. To which extent do you see similarities in how integrity and privacy issues are discussed within the cybersecurity sector, and how that could be applied or should not be applied, I don't know, to preventing child sexual abuse?
I think it's about data collection. Like we could detect even more malware, even more threats, not just detect them, but also prevent them if we had more data. But that data needs to be collected in a way that will basically break integrity. So we cannot do that. Then you have to find other types of way. But that discussion is a very hot topic in the industry. Like, what if we could do this? Then we could do all these different things as well.
But I think coming back to the sort of AI theme here, I think one of the promising things here, one of the big hypes now at the moment is edge AI, where you actually push the models out to the edge devices. And if you do that and can do the detection out there and then only report back identified bad material or bad things in general, I think that solves some of these problems. I'm actually fine with not guarding privacy so much for people who are doing crimes against children, for example. So I think, again, you have to decide that that's the level of where you're willing to report. But if you can decide that that's your sort of ethical level for what you do here, then we can do a lot more.
It's also interesting because there's certain legislation within different areas where people have thought about and made exceptions for, say, anti-terrorism measures or money laundering, which can be connected to anti-terrorism, and then they actually forget about the child protection factor, and it's something that we need to bear in mind as well, that there are exceptions made within society, and sometimes we forget which exceptions should be included.
Yeah. Another example, which I think is worth mentioning, another way of tracing things, so Bitcoin wallets is another interesting thing. People think they are very anonymous. They're not. They're very traceable in many ways. And so the cybersecurity industry is working a lot now to trace that, because that's how ransomware is paid. But I'm pretty sure it could be useful for tracing people who sell CSAM material as well. So
And we're seeing an increase actually in the commercialization of child sexual abuse material, as was mentioned during the AI-generated child sexual abuse material session. I would like to give the opportunity to our audience. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question? If so, you're welcome to come here, or I will approach you. We have a microphone available. Yes. Dan Sexton from, I know everyone. Dan Sexton, Chief Technology Officer of Internet Watch Foundation. Go ahead.
Thanks. It's not actually a question, actually. It's you've asked a bunch of questions which I thought I might be able to answer, and for those in the room. So with IWF, we track cryptocurrency and provide that information to law enforcement. It has resulted in some successful dismantling of entire child sexual abuse rings. It's been able to track down transactions to servers, to people, and that to take down servers, and that's then taken down all of the various people that bought it. So a huge success, actually. I would say it's early days success before criminals sort of realised it wasn't quite as anonymous as it was, and that technology is getting more anonymised now. It's harder to do. So there was a bit of a golden age, actually, where we caught a lot of people. As far as known content that you talked about, known content is actually is quite well advanced as far as finding this stuff. It's not built into cybersecurity stuff, and I think it's a really interesting comparison about that. But certainly on their own, Netclean being one of the sort of examples of it is doing it in alongside cybersecurity, but proactive detection for known images and videos is quite well advanced. And you talked about the operators, and there's a bit of an answer and a question for you, because I'm really interested in this. In the UK, every major network operator filters the internet for CSAM, and has been done for 20 years. That is not true, as I understand, in Europe. It's an ongoing conversation.
I'm glad that you make the distinction between Europe and UK.
Regrettably. It's not the case in America, for instance. So a really interesting story we had at the IWF recently. We did a partnership with Marriott Hotels, and they deployed a Europe domain list of websites that exclusively cater for and host CSAM on our block list. And with Cisco, they deployed this technology across Marriott Hotels to block the access to those websites. Great success story. Brilliant to see that happening. It is, as far as I know, the only network in America where you can't access those websites. So if you go to Marriott, you can't access child sexual abuse websites. Any other network anywhere else in America is not filtered. So it shows it can be done. It's just very selective, and that should be everywhere. So I do think the operators, the question about the operators is, we've certainly seen the impact of encryption significantly reducing the effectiveness of web filtering. The operators see less and less and less content. In your world, cybersecurity, how much of a concern is that for you, the impact of encryption on being able to gather that intelligence, that's particularly the stuff on the wire? Thank you.
Thank you.
I can answer one part there. So the question about encryption. So of course that, first of all, we don't decrypt things. We're not allowed to, or we wouldn't be able to pay for it. But I think you can get an awful lot of information just from the, as I mentioned, the NetFlow data, which of course those headers are never encrypted. They can't be. So you can always track traffic. So if you know malicious sites, you can still see where things are communicating. You cannot see what it's communicating. So of course it restricts your ability to see things, but it doesn't eliminate it completely.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, I see you want to reply.
Yeah. No, I mean, so encryption is on the network level is a problem, right? Because you can't basically sniff the network and look at the traffic from one point to another point. But there's other data that's not encrypted. That's part of that data, which you can detect, such as host names, DNS. So again, with the knowns, if you do have a known list, that could be blocked. And it's not happening in Sweden at all, as far as I know. Not at any hotel or telco or something. No, not as far as I know. So it's at least something. It's not everything, but it's better than nothing, right? So again, if we do have some knowns, I think it's, from the security industry's point of view, we could do much better with the knowns. It's not 100% there yet, but it's better than nothing.
We should just start listing our homes as Marriott hotels.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Anyone? Yes? And please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm a management consultant. I'm just working. You said that child safety is usually not mentioned in the cybersecurity sector. I was just wondering, what are ways that companies who aren't directly, working with products towards children or very obviously in this space, what are actions that they could take or ways they could engage? What would you like to see from other cybersecurity departments or companies?
Well, what I would like to see is that, as I said before, like applications owners, operating systems, app developers, they can detect the knowns. Like if you are on WhatsApp, you're on Signal, you're on Telegram, you're on whatever kind of platform, Facebook, Twitter. If you do send content that we know is malicious, why don't we stop what we know? That is not intrusive or in any way. I think we can do much more of that. And also, again, with the operating systems, like if you have an iPhone or an Android phone, you do have this ability to create a child account. What defines the child account is the age, of course, but then there's some restrictions. The restrictions could be like you should not send pictures or receive pictures of people that's outside your contact list, or there's a little just small things that we, I think, as an industry could implement, not to battle the problem or solve the problem, but to at least make it more difficult, or maybe not receive images at all. Maybe they're not old enough to do that. So there are a few things that we can do. And then I have a last provocative thing that I've been thinking about.
Oh, I love a surprise.
And that's something that really changed the security industry, was something called bug bounty. Imagine a world where we would use AI to detect vulnerabilities in software. That doesn't work, right? It's not good enough. We might find some, but percentage-wise, we'll find nothing. So you can hire a consultant, pay them per hour to find vulnerabilities in your systems. Good money, right? You can do that. But that's not very efficient because it costs a lot of money to do that. So what the security industry did is that they said, we will allow everybody in the entire world to look at these systems. And you'll get paid if you do find a vulnerability. Like a competition, basically. Now it's $1 billion industry with these bug bounty platforms where they have events in Vegas where they collect the biggest, the top hackers in the world, and they will find vulnerabilities and so on. Kind of like a whistleblower thing. You'll find vulnerabilities in the software and you get paid, and the company can fix the vulnerabilities and so on. Provocative ideas that we could have the same thing when it comes to detecting malicious things online. Things that's bad. This is a forum that's bad. This is thing. You can get help, like crowdfund the help that we need to actually battle this, instead of just having one company or a few companies have all the responsibility out there to fix this problem, and involve more people, individual people, but somehow give them something back for their help, something additional. It's just a provocative, crazy idea, but it's just something I've been thinking about.
And I just have to say this, like on the one hand, like this is a new idea, like as you said, one thing that immediately worries me is within our field, when it comes to child sexual abuse and perpetrators and potential perpetrators, we have quite a big problem with vigilantes. And so things can get, also things can get nasty and violent quite quickly. So I'm not saying no, but I'm also saying, just like with any idea, there's always, well, a risk assessment to be made.
Sure.
And so, but still very interesting. That actually, maybe you've already answered my last question, who knows? Because I wanted to ask both of you, if we were to reconvene here in 2 years' time, and again talk about the cybersecurity sector and its role when it comes to combating child sexual abuse, what are some concrete examples that you hope you would be able to give 2 years from now? And I don't know if it is that we've established bug bounty competitions, or is it something else?
No, I think it's more about the core infrastructure of the internet. We talked about telcos and hosting companies and so on, that you get them aligned with what we're trying to do here. Not to just say, well, we are just a provider, so we won't do anything. because they are the entity that's, you know, sending data from one point to another point. They are those entities. They should be able to help more than what they do. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you.
And I
Staffan?
think I agree with you, and I think that, and the other thing I think is that we should work to make sure that this becomes part of sort of the standard portfolio of cybersecurity or cyber protection, rather. That you should, you know, the checkboxes for which things does your organization prevent itself against. This is something we need to add there.
Thank you. I very much agree. Thank you both for participating, and thank you for the audience and everyone watching online. It's been very interesting to discuss the opportunities and the responsibilities within the cybersecurity sector, because this is a responsibility that belongs to all of society, and everyone needs to take part in helping and
Pitch in,
pitch in, exactly, because we want it to be, like you say, like part of the toolbox and part of the checklist. It should be as natural to combat as terrorism or money laundering, for that matter. So thank you, everyone, and we now invite you to the final session of the day, which is down in Wallenbergsalen. So please make your way there, and I shall see you there. Thank you.
Tack.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tack så jättemycket.